situation where we were going back into time, for just trying to reconcile and make sure that the town was received what it was due under the program. So I can't imagine this is going to happen again going forward, but I can't argue that the claim form that requested the drawdown did not show the percentage.
So we were invoicing the state for the 100%, but we were getting paid at the 90%. So the state was taking the 10% off.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, I think it was really just a miscommunication. I don't think we realized that we were supposed to show the 90%.
Yeah.
I think we were under the understanding, working closely with the DOT folks in reconciling this account. I guess it was just a misunderstanding as to how.
And we never had to pay anything back.
No.
So, yeah, okay.
So I didn't get too excited about that comment. It happened, but
So how much money of the total grant did we have to reconcile in some way?
oh
You
gosh,
said it was $100,000.
it's I want to say it was just under $3 million of grant
Yeah,
money
total.
in total over a decade, because this took the trail over several sections, and I can tell you that the timing of some of these claims when they were submitted, and by the time we got the money back, it made it difficult sometimes to, or easy to lose track of, wow, we never got the money for that one that we did submit.
At this point, we're reconciled with the state. The state has given us 90%. We've accounted
Yeah.
for our 10%
Yeah.
match.
Yeah.
For all the $3 million grant.
Yes.
So it's not an
I
outstanding.
can tell you, I have a spreadsheet that would make my hair.
I'm sure. I probably know a little bit about this because I can remember having professional fees for work on the trail
Yeah.
that I was asked not to submit because there was no money to pay them, but the work had been done, and so we held. There's background.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of knowledge why some of this might have occurred because staff is saying, "Well, it's not in the grant." And so, we did the work. I remember, and some of that probably muddied up your accounting as well.
There was some of the grant money. It was even unclear what we were supposed to get reimbursed for, and I think that was part of the problem because nobody ever got their arms around it until recently when we pushed the envelope to make sure that
Count your blessings. We have projects that are 15 years old, and I still can't get retainage back from the DOT.
and that was part of it too.
Retainage?
Yeah.
DOT is tough.
And in fact, there were probably some legitimate unreimbursable costs. So
okay, but it's reconciled.
But it's reconciled,
and the state and the town are not.
We're happy. I can't tell you how happy I am to be able to finally
done
have
with
closure on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So that completes, I guess, reporting relative to bound documents. We've also finalized an advisory letter that will probably be issued tomorrow. It hasn't been issued as of yet. We have gone through it with management. We went back and forth.
And I did send out to the group a draft this afternoon, and I don't know if anybody brought that, but I have copies here.
Thank you.
And I thought I'd go through that just briefly here.
Yeah.
And I might as well give you this is an IT assessment that was performed last year that's referenced in the document, in the management letter. So just so you have the full picture. So Ron, I don't know, maybe if you want me to start and you can chime in, or the other way around.
You're doing a great job.
So a lot of these comments are somewhat similar to perhaps what we saw in last year's management letter, and Ben, if there's anything I'm missing here, please chime in.
Got it.
But there's a couple of new ones, and so maybe we'll start with the bond premium. Honestly, we've been recording our bond premiums the same way here for decades, and honestly, I didn't realize that there was a change in the accounting standards relative to the recognition of the bond premiums, maybe a couple of years ago, and I could be wrong. It wasn't a well publicized change. We missed it. I think probably most of my peer municipalities missed it.
I would say yes, that's correct.
And at the end of the day, it probably certainly wasn't material to our financial statements. So really, I see this as a change that we've certainly incorporated in this audit report. And going forward, we'll make sure that we comply with how these amortizations are supposed to work. I don't know, Gina, if you remember any more details on, was it a matter of straight line, or did they change the years, or?
We were doing it straight line.
Yeah.
Right,
Now
and it's supposed to be done under effective
Yeah, I know.
interest.
effective interest rate, yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah, we never, at Bloom, certainly knew the requirement existed, but every amortization goes to zero, and it goes to zero over the same time frame, right? A bond premium, if it's a 20-year bond, is amortized over the 20 years of the debt. So the calculations differ annually, effective interest compared to straight line. Effective interest, the interest charge is going to be higher in the early years and lower in the latter years, but in the end, each goes to zero. So we never felt as though at Bloom that it was that big of a deal. This is one of the nuanceical things, if you will, for lack of a better term, relative to our transition to Clifton Larson Allen. It is considered to be a larger item as far as CLA is concerned, or per our technical reviewers that we, the audit team, has to answer to. So our hand was a little bit forced. When I say ours, I mean legacy Bloom Shapiro folks. So
I don't fully understand this, Peter, and Sandy may understand this more. So does 1.5 million have any implications on the budget we just approved, or is that?
No, this would be on our government-wide financial statements, which, frankly, for budgeting purposes, it's like apples and oranges. Again, our government-wide financial statements take in all our funds on a full accrual basis of accounting and mold them all up into one big fund
meaningless
balance.
blob.
Yeah, meaningless blob, because I'm still trying to figure out who uses that information and why. It's in certain respects, if anything meaningful comes out of that government-wide information, it's trend data. And to the fact that, you might be doing something consistently wrong or consistently right, but I can tell you based on the size of the numbers that the amortization of our bond premium is a pinhole in what, the meat and potatoes of that is really our bond liabilities and, our capital assets. I mean, it's just such a small piece that it really wouldn't stick out if you were looking for it. Segregation of duties, manual journal entries, and I'm just going to speak frankly in an effort to kind of go through these. But if you have any questions, I can tell you that I think we do a pretty good job of reviewing our journal entries or that are processed throughout the year. What we don't do perhaps is a good job of documenting, for example, that I approve that I need to reclass something out of this fund and put it into this fund. Every once in a while, there's something that comes across my desk that requires that because something got misposted. And I want to say probably the Board of Ed may or may not have similar issues. But at the end of the day, I'll make sure that my office in general does a better job of making sure that there's somebody's initials on an entry other than the person that's inputting that entry. We do journal entries monthly. They're kind of standard journal entries. There's several people involved with that process, and they are pretty routine entries. And we also do entries with our audit. Those are the ones that are probably the most significant because they have all our year-end closing entries. Those I have documented as signing off on, and Gina and I kind of take turns reviewing each other's work, just to make sure there's a second set of eyes on any of those types of entries. Again, it's those ad hoc ones that pop into the picture that I think we need to do a better job on. And there were similar control, as you go further down that page, internal control documentation, where, signing off on bank statements, for example, we do reconcile our bank statements, and I've never really signed off on anything, but it probably is an appropriate practice to have at least a second set of eyes on those reconciliations. And I can tell you there are a second set of eyes or even a third set of eyes, but we haven't done a real good job of putting our initials down there on saying that, yeah, I reviewed it or whatever. And that's kind of, I think, happened in a few places. I can tell you that, payroll we have a lot of internal controls built into our system, where, if we add an employee or subtract an employee or change a dollar amount of what's being paid to someone, that I've got to approve it, and it goes through not just me, but Lou and several processes. But I think in general, again, what the auditors like to see is a set of initials on the payroll runs themselves. I don't, personally, I kind of look through these all the time, and it's probably, if I were to catch something, it'd be a small miracle because, how can you really keep track of, several hundred people and, to know whether they're legit or not. I think it's the controls that we have set up, about making changes that are the important ones. But in general, Vin and I have talked about this at length. We're going to get together a group from both offices to try to figure out what the best approach is to make sure that our auditors are comfortable that what we say is being reviewed is reviewed. And I don't know if you got that.
What I hear here is not the process or the procedures that are problematic. It's the documentation of the process and the procedures. And is that the same in your office too?
Yeah, that's what, the auditors are looking for. So that finding on the internal control documentation is to document the processes we have.
Yeah.
And then even if you look like journal entries, we really don't do many journal entries on the board side. And for the most part, they're processed on the town's books and records. So those are being processed, recommended, and then processed. So the controls are there. We do log on paper anytime there's a journal entry on the board side. But, taking the time, and there's another finding further on about putting together an accounting procedures manual. So, we will put together a committee and do that jointly because a lot of our procedures are the same, like reviewing payroll, even though I think, our payroll approval procedure is insane. We've got it documented, several different times. And it's interesting because Munis tracks a lot of things, right? So if you're going to approve a purchase rec, issue a purchase order, that's all very trackable, and it has approval requirements. Journal entries don't have that same multi-level approval requirements. I think that's kind of one of the questions around that.
Okay.
How much electronic reviewing do you do?
A lot.
So is there,
So I could tell you, just any requisitions where people request payment get approved by myself. and or Sean at a minimum. And sometimes there's other parties that are circuited into the loop too. If, like, for example, it's an IT purchase, we make sure that somebody from that department reviews it too.
So how do we get to this recommendation that there's something, is it an Apex thing that says so that we validate the electronic? So if you look at something, Gina sends you something and you look at it electronically and say, yep, this is good to go.
Yeah.
How do you put your JJ on it, so to speak, to say this is good?
Because that electronically will not move forward to be able to become, say, for example, a purchase order that can get printed out unless I electronically approve it. Is that
Okay.
what you're asking?
So yeah,
Yeah.
does that though meet this requirement that you're talking
So
about?
that's the embedded control in the software or a component of the control. What we're saying here relative to this comment is simply that, and I shared this with at least Jim and Vincent, is, it's a long shot. I know, and I pray to God it never happens, but if your staff just got up and walked out tonight and all new people had to be brought in tomorrow, and a lot of your operations are, we'll just, do what so-and-so was doing because they were doing it right.
Okay.
What is that? What does that mean?
Right.
Got
So
it.
that's kind of, and maybe I didn't put the right spin on what some of the background on this is.
Yeah.
But it's we might even be doing the right thing. It's just documenting what it is that we are doing
Okay.
if there's turnover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no,
thanks for pointing that out.
to I guess pull you fully in this loop, we had some other things that were drafted in the context of this, our original draft, that when I met with Jim and Vincent, I was schooled a little more relative to those embedded controls within Munis, and I said, yeah, that's clearly not a weakness then if that's what exists, but
Yep.
I have to be.
But there should be a policy.
Yeah,
or
it's a silly statement, but I always say leave an organization stronger when your time is done. And so,
Is that something that would be met by what
yes.
Vin just talked about,
Yes.
putting together that manual that
Yes.
says, okay.
So that same person that
Good.
I just referred to, you could look at chapter 3.
Exactly.
That's all about what
Gina's
I
not
need
going anywhere though. So.
And as far as a manual in one location, we're constantly, I think, adding to that. So it's just like a never-ending battle, though, because procedures change over time with technologies and things like that. So it's really just putting a little more effort to making sure those are up to speed and developed in the first place where they haven't been.
I don't know, but when will we typically meet again after today as a committee?
As a committee, typically not till next year at this time, but we can certainly have another meeting if.
Yeah, I don't mind meeting again in a month.
Sure.
And having you and Vin come up with a written kind of suggestion on the controls implementation, because I think it's worthwhile to take this seriously and make sure that next year, that when the auditors come through, it's been addressed. I think it will be, but I'd like this committee to have some kind of procedural assurance that we're taking it seriously. We're putting those documentations in, and if you need 2 months to do that, we can do it in 2 months.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say, John, is based on kind of what they're talking about is getting together both sides of the street and working on that document. Maybe we give them 3 months or something,
Yeah,
and something down the road to be able to.
And it doesn't have to be elaborate. Just simple.
No,
just-
something that will
just
address
saying what you're doing and writing.
several of these
Yeah.
issues that.
That was kind of our intention anyway,
Yeah.
is to come up with, I think some kind of written response to all of this and what we're going to do or not do.
So we can talk about before this is over what's appropriate. That's
Yep.
fine, Peter.
Yeah. And I think that's a great idea.
Just gives us all, kind of a reason to make sure that we get there.
Absolutely.
Because you'll be busy right after this meeting's over, and you'll be doing.
Yeah, I was going to
Totally
say.
get it. And-
Yeah.
and that's
After-
part of the problem.
After
yeah.
capital is set to bank.
Okay. On the kind of going on to the page 2, there's some comments on the census data that's used for our pension benefits. So every year we have to provide, well, at least every other year, census data to our actuaries. And a lot of times they'll give us what they have in their system and we'll update it. But there were several instances that the auditors came across where there were incorrect dates. There was one for a higher date that was, I think, just marginally off, and there was several between the town and Board of Ed where the benefit start date was incorrect for whatever reason. And I talked to our actuary today to try to get a better handle on that. And we think that it might have stemmed from when we converted from the previous actuary, because the previous actuary provided the data file to the new actuary, and perhaps when they were entering it into their system. I've never become aware of this being a widespread issue, but I can assure you, and we can talk about this at the next meeting, that we're going to go through 100%. Some of these figures that we never really paid much attention to, right? Because they're already getting a benefit. We assumed that the information was in there was correct. Obviously, there's been a few instances where they found it was incorrect. And so we're going to make sure that we go through that with a fine-tooth comb.
But this is a legacy issue, right? Because
Yes.
we're not adding any new employees, other, maybe the volunteer firefighters plan, so.
Correct.
There's no new employees going in.
And totally, agree that, our liabilities and our actually recommended contributions, rely on accurate census data. So we'll make sure we get that in the works. The third bullet is about review process in place for the volunteer firefighter plan. So I can tell you that for the town, police, and Board of Education, I review 100% of all the calculations that are done by the actuary. I do an independent calculation to make sure that we come up with the same thing. Frankly, I don't know if that was always being done historically, but I felt that was a good idea. The fire department volunteers, those are the fire department volunteers, so I never really got involved with reviewing those. And my understanding, talking with I think it's Don Youngquist over there, who manages or has historically managed a lot of those records, they've pretty much provided the data to the actuaries, and the actuaries have pretty much just signed off on it because it's really based on their paper call records and years of service and so forth. So I did have a conversation with our actuary today. I think Dawn, myself, and her are going to get together and just discuss what we can do to, maybe enhance that, whether the actuaries get more involved with the calculation process, or we get more involved, or maybe there's some kind of controls that we can set up that we can periodically review. Because I can tell you that I have no idea on the volunteers how many years they've worked there. I've kind of taken that for granted. How many paper calls each individual has done each year, and that's what their pension is based on. It's not
And
like
we're gonna be-
it's on my payroll.
Ordinance is looking at changing that anyway, or personnel is one of the two committees that we're on.
But either way, we'll look into that and we can come back to you.
Well, you look into it and make sure that the fire department internally has controls as well, so we're not listening to one person's opinion as to how many calls.
I can tell you that they are getting sign-offs over there that, for example, Jack is signing off.
They have
Yeah.
controls
Comfortable
as to
with
who was at what.
who's been there for how long, and I think that it's not like they aren't reviewing this, and they review it with the individual as well, from what I understand, to give them a chance that, hey, I worked more than that,
Yeah,
or, you know, that
Yeah,
type
yeah.
of thing.
Okay.
But, okay. Information technology, I don't know if I really have a lot to comment right now on this, but that's that assessment that was a lot of recommended best practices.
Yep.
I don't feel as though we have any what's the right word? Material weaknesses in our IT program right now. And you know, I'm not sure, you know, if this is something maybe we can look at with the technology committee some point.
And that's,
but-
I actually made a note on that, Jim, because I think that's the appropriate place for it. The one thing in going through this was the updated and tested disaster recovery plan.
Right.
And that's something that Apex could do for us, so.
Right. And I realize things have changed a lot too, like even our accounting system, right? We're on the cloud now where we weren't a couple of years ago. So that adds maybe another layer of concerns in there. And so, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to vet this out a little bit more.
So
to make sure
who
this-
is responsible for overseeing our IT? Is it just administratively through the town manager's office, or is there a committee or something that oversees IT as well? Because I don't even know.
So there's a technology study group that started quite a while ago. Probably a decade ago to get things up to speed. We were in a very bad place and we're in a very good place now. There are some changes based on the recommendation, but it's over, it's handled by Apex. There is a checks and balances in place. And then the technology study group.
And this technology study group is made up of town employees? or
It's
is it
made up
others?
Steve Carroll Steve Carroll chairs it. Patty Flynn Harris is on it, myself and Massiana.
It's not appointed by the council, though.
It is appointed by the
It is
council.
appointed by the
Yep.
council?
It was appointed by the
So
council.
we do have
I
like a
said.
third party kind of entity that's involved, not just the
Yeah.
town's consultant and their staff, which is good. That's all. I was curious. No, that seems appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Just to kind of keep things moving along, on page 3, accounting procedures manual, I think that's just
Yeah.
basically what we talked about briefly. Fraud tip line. I know that's something that we did start to discuss, and maybe there's a service out there that we could procure to allow for employees to submit tips. And I think we had good intentions of following through with that, but it was blame everything on COVID a little bit.
Yeah,
But,
not to make excuses,
yeah.
but, I mean, this-
I believe this was on the last audit that we had.
it was, yeah.
Last
And,
year.
and again, these are
Recommended
best
fraud
practices.
assessment.
These that are recommended. I think it's really up to us whether we want to spend the money. But I think this is something we were seriously considering.
And it's something that maybe Jeff D'Onofrio can help us with. He may be familiar with something that some of the other towns use that we could adapt or whatever.
yeah, Sean had mentioned that when he was in Simsbury, they had a
Yeah.
service that, they used for
Yeah.
implementation of a fraud tip.
Yeah, it's an independent, because you don't wanna have one. In other words, if you have a problem with if you think you see something with the education department, call up Vin Massiano.
right.
Yeah.
Because that kind of defeats the purpose. But, an independent is absolutely right, so, yeah.
Well, they're looking for an independent place to report, but they're also suggesting here a fraud assessment of some kind, which I'm not sure what that would cost. and whether and you said you considered it last year, or Sandy, you said it.
It was on the
It was on
report
there,
last
but
year.
we're not doing.
I don't know
it's
if we
appropriate or
really
not.
gave that one as much thought, and, you know, maybe that's something we can reach out and get some pricing.
The risk assessment
Yeah.
process.
Fraud risk.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it to
I would
understand.
say what we can do is maybe give you, you know, outline guideline parameters, because you have, right, wrong, or different, right? You have to, as an auditor, evaluate the talent of your client, and you guys are pretty savvy. So it could be done in-house. It's really your team, Vin's team, sitting down and going through with probably ideally with some representation from this committee. And it's really a brainstorming session. What could go wrong? What could happen? Where could something happen? Where are we weak?
Yep.
And identify those areas.
So is there some kind of guideline that
we can we can get some information to you. Yeah.
We're trying to do it if we can this year, so it's
Yeah.
not.
We can
At least we can
facilitate
check off
too.
that box next year, because it's,
Yeah.
you know, it sounds like there's a lot of good systems in place, but sometimes just a thought, I don't know how much you can handle. There's only so much you can
I
do.
don't know how much I can handle.
We can
Do the best we can.
we can facilitate it, and facilitate the meeting, if you will. And that's up to you. But what I'm suggesting to you is, I think the intelligence is in this room. That you wouldn't have to pay for someone to come and facilitate.
That's
it. So
Okay.
worth talking about. So maybe
Yep.
at the follow-up meeting, we can talk about it.
And if we need to do a follow-up meeting on that?
Yeah, that's
we
fine.
just- yeah. All right, I guess I don't think I have anything else, as far as the audit report. You know, I'll just say in general, you know, we had about $1 million surplus for the year. You know, I wanted to focus more on some of the comments and things like that, just so you understood what was here. But, you know, we kind of went through all of that in the budget process. There's no surprises here, you know. It's what you saw when we were looking at, during the budget process. You know, I will say that, you know, the tax collections, we came in with a 97% collection rate, which was good considering we had COVID issues and delays in timing of receipts. The tax revenues in general were less than they were in what I'll call a normal year. And it wasn't so much for COVID. We actually did pretty good, considering some of the COVID delays. But because we were still, and if you recall, last year we had a number of settlements from the 2018 grand list valuation. So you'll see that the tax revenues, if you look at the detail in the report, are probably not quite as high as we would expect. Normally, I would have like a $500,000 surplus there, and I probably only have like $100,000 surplus there. But it was because a lot of the settlements took place and were, you know, reduced the amount of revenue that we show there.
What do we budget collections at now?
99.2.
And
So-
we're at 99.7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Great.
that if it wasn't for any of these settlements that were offsets, would result in about a $500,000 surplus.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're winding down on that. You might see few more trickling in this year, but I think the heavy hitters are behind us. Other than that, we had a really good year on departmental revenues, all things considered. You know, fiscal 21, the building and conveyance fees, building permits were all robust and continue to be robust. And then we also had some COVID grants that reimbursed us for over $200,000 of our COVID-related supplies and cleaning costs and things like that weren't anticipated when we did this budget.
Yeah.
So that's what gave us our roughly 800,000 of surplus. And then there was a couple 100,000 surplus on the expenditure side. But, you know, if y'all have any questions on any of the detail, call me anytime. And,
So do we want to actually accept this formally, or because it's on
I
our
think we
agenda?
do because,
Yes, you do.
and, maybe we can leave it as a follow-up as far as addressing some of these comments at a subsequent.
We definitely, I mean, I for one am overjoyed with everything I've seen since I've been on the council, but, and particularly the work of your team. And the fact that there are items here, I think is a good thing, because it shows that, it's better than us here sitting patting ourselves on the back. Everything's perfect. I'd rather be self-critical and work harder and improve. And these are tangible things that we can do to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. It hasn't identified mistakes, what's identified is opportunities to make sure we don't make mistakes as I see it. So I'm, for one person who's new on this committee, I'm pretty satisfied. I'm not sure if this is a longer letter than we typically get, but I don't see that as a negative thing. I see it as something that is a
Yeah.
product,
My experience is, some audit firms tend to be a little light on the pencil and not really, put anything in writing and just express it verbally, and other firms might,
I see this as all positive.
I-
personally.
Yeah.
So you-
Yep, absolutely.
So let's move forward. Can we have a motion to accept acceptance of our fiscal year 2021 annual comprehensive financial audit / report /
I'll make
audit?
that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Yes, all in favor?
I just want to add too, we do submit this for an award from the, our professional organization, Government
Yeah.
Finance Officers Association. So we've kept up with that, and I think that sits well with rating agencies and things like that.
Yeah, you do a great
Yeah, it
job.
does.
As far as the content of the report goes.
Now, we do have another agenda item, and it's getting late. I don't know if we have time to do it.
And then, Ron, you don't have to stay for this. I think this is where we're gonna just,
Ron's
Yeah,
got to work on his tan somehow or
No,
another. He finds time to get a tan when none of us here have the time. So I just want to mention that.
I was in wine country in California.
Oh,
I got home midnight last night. So,
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So you're all jet lagged anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah.
You poor thing.
yeah.
Yeah, we feel bad for
You
you.
do really bad.
We're over it.
and thank you for coming out. I look
Yeah.
forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
you real soon.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's time to ramp up
We're
for
ready to roll.
next
Yes,
year.
yes.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Yes.
for the
Thank you.
comprehensive audit as well.
Take care, take care. Thank you for this thing as well.
And then, I'll try to make this last part real quick. This is from the RFP that we did several years ago. And,
Do you have one more, Jim?
yeah, sorry. I circled where we're at. This is year 3 coming up.
Mhm.
This was a RFP for a 3-year contract with an option to extend for an additional 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
So, I could personally say I'm not unhappy with the service. The audit was late this year. It was on extension twice. If you look at the OPM website, I think you're going to see there were only like maybe a dozen reports that were filed timely out of 169 towns. And a lot of those towns were some of the smallest ones in the state.
And is a lot of that the transition from companies?
So I
From
can
Bloom.
just tell you, there seems to be a dearth of firms that are, qualified to do these audits. There's several that have kind of gotten out of the government business, which is probably not a good thing. CLA took over Bloom. Bloom does probably over half of Connecticut's.
CLA must be nice, because I thought Bloom was a good firm.
Yeah, I did too.
And I think, as Ron said, part of it might have been the transition.
Right.
I'll be honest with you, there were some COVID issues that came up during the year, and there was indirect COVID issues, like where we were waiting for documentation from third parties, for example, on some of our pension investments that were delayed. So, I can't really blame anybody that things were late.
Yeah.
I know this coming year, next year at this time, I'm hoping to do a bond sale, so I'm really going to try to push to make sure that doesn't happen again. But
So Jim, so I understand, we have a quote from them for next year for $67,050.
yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah, and I think it's a reasonable
But that doesn't
increase.
50% town underneath it. What is that talking about? I don't know.
So the fees are split, between the town and Board of Ed 50/50.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
right, yeah.
And what's that
That's just-
12, all exclusive for internal control operations of Cheshire, what's that 12,000? Is that in addition to?
So
the
that was
67?
additional audit that I think is still in the process from when we did this
That
RFP
was the
originally.
sports
The
thing and all
student
that.
activity review.
Right, yes, I
Which-
remember that. That's right.
Yeah, where does that stand?
They finished the field work and they just.
And you're just waiting for the report?
Yeah, we got the draft report. We're gonna meet with the Board of Ed on it June,
So that,
June
Yeah,
9th.
that's not a recurring expense here then?
No.
It was a
No.
one time.
That
And
is a one-time.
That wasn't split with the town.
That was
paid
requested.
by
I
the
can
board.
tell you that, you know, I think the fees that were bid and they were the low bid, are very reasonable for a
Yeah.
town this size
Mhm.
and,
Well, with inflation, I mean, we've got them locked in at a good.
Yeah.
Vina, you're satisfied with them as well, because you're just paying 50% of it,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, the person that was the lead resigned kind of right at the tail end of the audit, which I'm not
So-
unhappy
so
about. She
Ron-
wasn't that
Ron is new?
communicative. No, Ron is the partner in charge. The
Yeah.
lead person that comes in
Comes
is
in-
not Ron.
Oh, okay, I see
You
what
know,
you're saying.
he's there to oversee the audit, but, yeah, they're fine. They did a good job.
Well, it's
They
almost
did
6
very
o'clock,
thorough.
Sandy, Peter, do you wanna move this tonight, or do you wanna let it sit, should we
No, I
decide
think
tonight?
we should go ahead with it.
You're
you know, if it's
comfortable?
my preference, I'm comfortable because I don't think we have a better alternative at this point.
No, I think,
And they're doing, I think, what they're hired to do, and they're doing.
And-
and it's not
We did do an
unreasonable.
RFP a couple of
Yeah.
years ago,
Right.
so, you know, this would have been in the realm of what was very competitive at the time.
Right.
so
And I can see it's not much
I
more now.
doubt it's,
No.
yeah, I doubt it's
Just want to
changed.
throw out too.
There's a
to let
minimal
OPM
increase
know,
of-
the sooner the better. Who
Yeah,
are
we
So
on
it is
the
time.
committee,
We
so.
should vote on it, yeah.
Yeah, you wanna vote? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm
So-
comfortable with
So
that.
could we have a motion?
You wanna make it?
I'll move that we move forward with, a third year with CLA.
I will second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. You've got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Is there any other business that you're aware of, Jim?
No, I think, I just, you know, maybe we can follow up offline as to when to set up another meeting.
Yeah, we definitely should set up another one and follow up on some of these
Yeah.
things. It just, you know, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but I think
Right.
it's good that we keep ourselves.
I'd rather that we do it in 2 months, frankly, not 3, just so.
Okay.
2
That'll
months
get
is
us
good.
into July for us.
And
on
then you'll
the
have
school
that
side.
audit from the,
Student activity.
Right,
So
I
we'll-
think that would
So
be
we'll set up a
great
meeting in
because
2
we
months to
do
go
that.
through how
So,
we're gonna deal
yeah.
with some of the items in the
Yeah.
audit and make sure we're.
So the end of June, or the end of July.
July.
See how we're available, we'll
Yeah.
just get a time that we're all
Sound good?
available.
Yeah, no, I'd rather do it
That's
in
great.
July.
I'm glad you're happy to do that, because I think
Yeah.
it's positive.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is.
Any other thing that Sandy or Peter
No.
we should be talking about?
No, we're
I'll
good.
move, we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Thanks.
All in favor?
All right.
Or adjourned?
Thank
Thank
you, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Everything.
Thank you, very nice.